All right, so you've been working on your shape layers and adding drop shadows to them and color overlays with hue saturation adjustment layers. All right, a couple things to check on before we continue. Right now I have pulled my layers palette away. So usually your layers palette is down here. And as we make a bunch of new layers, you have to scroll through them. So I like to just grab the whole layers palette and then enlarge it so that I can see more of the layers this way. So that might be something you like to do. All right, next, what I'd like to see is that you check on your file size. Your file size might be pretty big if you are using a stock photo. Let's go to image size. All right, now notice mine is really big since I got the photo off of one of the stock photo sites. It has very large dimensions. It's over 55 inches by 83 inches. All right, that's a really big file, especially for our school computers. Now, the larger your file is, the harder it is for Photoshop and your computer to save the file. So if your file is very large like mine, it's time to shrink it down. All right, so on the width, let's just go ahead and enter 14. Let the height automatically adjust. In the future, make sure to open up a brand new document, which is 11 by 14 or 14 by 11, and then drag and drop your photograph onto it so that you know right from the beginning you're working within our class file size, which is 11 by 14, and you could do resolution 300 ppi if you start your document at 11 by 14. All right, when I click OK, it's going to look a lot smaller, and that's because the file size is now going to be a lot smaller. And at the end of class, when you go to save your work, you shouldn't have any problems saving. All right, so make sure to reduce that file size so that at least one side is maximum 14 inches, and then you'll be able to save your work at the end of class. All right, I'm going to zoom back in. I'm going to double click on the hand. All right, so my resolution is still very good. All right, I just reduced the dimensions, the inches. All right, a couple of things to remember. We are working on layering lots of vector shapes. They could be all organic, they could be all geometric. You could have a combination of organic and geometric shapes. Okay, so I'm just going to review real quick how to add your shapes, and then we'll move on to using brushes. Okay, I'm going to just continue at the top of my layers palette and add another shape. I'll get my pen tool, double check that my pen tool is on shape up here on the sub menu. Doesn't really matter what my fill color is since I'm going to clip the photograph into it. All right, and then I'll go ahead and make my new shape. Making sure to trace all the way around and close the path. Now notice that Photoshop tried to guess for me and say, oh, you probably want another clipping mask. Well, no, I don't want a clipping mask onto the photo. So I'm going to release that. And looks like I need to push that layer above my hue saturation layer. And see how the clipping mask on my hue saturation layer got released? I'm going to put that back on, right click, create clipping mask, so that that hue saturation layer only goes to the layer right below it. If I turn on and off the eyeball, you'll see that's the layer that has the hue saturation adjustment on it, and I only want it on the layer right below. All right, so there's my new shape right here on top. And if you really want to stay organized, you can be renaming your layers. Like I could rename that, lips. right now this is still a vector shape. It still has its path around it. I could go back and edit this shape with my path selection tool or my white arrow, the direct selection tool, because right now it's still a vector shape, right? So I can edit the path. Okay, but let's say I'd like to do something like rotate it or make it bigger and smaller with my regular free transform. If I want to do that, I need to rasterize the shape. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and right click on that ellipse shape I made, and I'm going to rasterize the layer. All right, notice now that the little path square symbol is gone from the preview image, the thumbnail image, because this shape is now pixels, it's rasterized. So let's say I wanted to make it bigger or smaller with free transform. Now I can, or rotate it. All right, time to add the photograph and clipping mask. So I'm going to duplicate one of my photos, drag and drop it on top of that new shape in the layers palette. I need to create a clipping mask on the photo. Right click, create clipping mask. Okay, and now notice that once again I lost the clipping mask on my hue saturation layer. And that's why the whole document turned green and blue. All right, so I just need to go back to this hue saturation layer, right click, put that clipping mask back on. All right, now my lips, I can see right here that it's there, but I can't see all of it because I didn't do my drop shadow yet. All right, so remember, here's your shortcut to copying the drop shadow you have on all of your other layers. I'm going to go over here to the FX, hold Alt on the keyboard, click and drag the FX up to my other shape layer. And now there it is, there's that drop shadow on that new shape layer. Okay, I could leave this the same photo, realistic photograph, or I could add another hue saturation layer. All right, so I'm on the photograph copy I just made for the lips. I'll go down and click on the half black, half white circle for new adjustment layer, hue saturation. All right, now right now notice that I don't have a clipping mask on my new hue saturation layer. So if I go to my properties now and adjust the hue, it's going to adjust the hue of all colors in my document. So if I want to limit this to only that shape on top of the lips, I've got to create a clipping mask on this hue saturation layer. Right click, create clipping mask. All right, so now it's clipped onto that shape layer that I did on top of the lips. And now if I adjust the hue, it's only adjusting to the shape right below the hue saturation adjustment layer. Okay, time to add some texture with brushes. I'm going to go to Google and I'm going to look for some free Photoshop brush sites. If you can type in free Photoshop brushes. I definitely like Brush Easy. Right, Brush Easy has free brushes, a lot of them, and they usually work with our school firewalls. All right, so from here, there's actually already some fun paint splatter and watercolor brushes on their main page, which I am definitely looking for. You can always just type in paint spatter or splatter. You can type in watercolor brushes and search. You can type in any other kind of brushes, like fractal brushes might be fun for this assignment as well. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and choose one of these free ones. I'm going to click on it and click the free download button. And give it a couple seconds to download. You should get a pop-up box asking you where you want the download. Okay, I'm going to put mine on my desktop, and you can keep the name they already have, or you can rename it. I'm going to just rename it so that it has splatter when I go look for it, and I'll click save. All right, I'll minimize my browser. I don't need that right now. All right, let's take a look at my desktop, and you'll see, okay, where is that? There it is. It's a zip file that I just downloaded to my desktop. I'm going to double click to open it up, and I want to double check that I have a file in there that has the extension ABR. All right, brushes have the extension ABR, and those are the brushes that will work here at school. That's good. All right, back to Photoshop. How do I get my brush? I'm going to go to the brush tool, and I'm going to go to my sub menu and drop down my brush menu right there, the one that's not the first one, the second one. Drop it down. Go to the little wheel on the right hand side of the drop down brush menu, and I'm going to go to import brushes. And I get to browse for the brush. So I'll go to my desktop and browse for the splatter brush. Okay, now right now it's not showing it to me, and the reason is because it's still in a zip file. All right, so I'm going to go back to my desktop, and you know how here it is in a zipped file? I'm going to open it, and I'm going to drag and drop the brush out of the folder. All right, so now there's the brush out of the folder. Now let's try again and see if Photoshop can find the brush. So brush tool, drop down the brush menu, go to the wheel, import brushes. All right, and now I'm on my desktop, and then there's the brush right there, Free Paint Splatter Photoshop. Okay, so I'll click it and load. All right, now that it loaded, I'm going to scroll, so I'm still in that brush drop-down menu. I'm going to scroll all the way down to the bottom of my brushes, and there's the new folder. There was 20 brushes in there, so there it is at the bottom, and I'll click on the arrow to open it up. Okay, so there's all my new brushes, and I'm going to have to definitely reduce their pixels because they're huge. All right, so I got a lot of new brushes. All right, from here, I'm going to use one of these splatter brushes to add some texture to some of my shapes. Let's see if I can find one that's a little less. Okay, I'm going to reduce that down pretty far. I'm just sort of hovering on the document to see how big the brush splatter will be. All right, that looks good. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is this. I am going to add this paint splat texture to the side of this vector shape right here. So that vector shape over the eye, I'm going to go search for it. That's it right there. I even named the layer left eye so I could find it pretty easily. Remember, you can always turn on and off the eyeball of your layer to find your shape. Now remember, I also already rasterized this vector shape, and it's got the little gray and white checkerboard telling me that this layer is rasterized. It needs to be rasterized in order to do this next step. All right, so I'm going to go to that vector shape layer, not the photograph, the actual shape layer, which has been rasterized. And I'm going to go over and simply click and stamp that brush. Now take a look at what happened. See how it added the texture to the edge of the shape, and it still took on the clipping mask and hue adjustment because it's on the same layer as the vector shape. I'm just really adding to that vector shape by stamping the brush. Now at this point, if I keep stamping again, I'm getting that same shape, that same splash. And so you're like, okay, yeah, all they did was keep stamping the same brush. So what I could do is get a new brush tip and create some new shape and dimension. How about this though? I'm going to just tailor this brush. I'm going to open up my brush preset folder right there. So once again, that's right here. I'm in the brush tool. To the right of the drop down brushes is that folder. I'm going to click it and open it up. And now over here for the rotation of the brush, I'm going to go ahead and rotate it a little bit. And you can see the preview here that I'm rotating it. I can also, I'm not gonna paint with the brush, but if you do paint with the brush, you can increase the spacing. So here you can see that instead of the brush having it all close together and almost merging the splatter, you could increase the spacing and then have it actually scatter the splatter, right? Okay, you can also still increase the size of the brush here as well. But what I was really focusing on was changing the angle of the brush. All right, so I've totally flipped it pretty much 180 now. And I'm going to go over and stamp again with it. And you can see here that now I got that nice shape right here. All right, so adding some texture around the edge right there. I'm going to do that to some of my other shapes now. All right, so for instance, right here, this one is the skin-colored one that I left above the eye. All right, so let's say I want to go ahead and add a brush to that one. Take a look at what's going to happen. All right, so I want to add a different brush. And it's saying no. It's saying, no, you can't add a brush. I'm getting that circle with the slash through it. All right, so let's think about this. Why can't I add a brush? Well, the answer is that this shape layer is still a vector shape layer, and I can see my little path symbol on the preview. I can't add a brush to a vector shape layer. I need to rasterize this layer in order to add that brush. All right, so I'm going to right click on this layer, rasterize the layer. Okay, now that it's rasterized, it's pixels. Now there's that brush I wanted. All right, so I'm going to edit this brush. Let's go to my brush folder. I'm going to definitely decrease the size of the brush. Okay, now I can go ahead and stamp on that vector shape. Okay, there we go. If I zoom in, you can see it. There it is. All right, I can add more if I want. Maybe I want to add more to the other side. Okay, so now I'm adding some of that texture and that paint splatter shape around, kind of breaking the edge, the hard edge of each vector shape. All right, and that's just using spatter brushes. Maybe you want to try out watercolor brushes or charcoal brushes or any kind of art brush that has a nice texture to it. Okay, so keep going with your vector shapes, adding your drop shadows, your hue adjustment layers, and now adding your paintbrush textures around your vector shapes. Make sure to be layering your shapes like I have started to do. There's actually 1, 2, 3, 4 right here on this grouping. All right, and I started out with 2 here and 2 here, but if I'm going to keep going, I'm going to add more shapes that are overlapping and layering to create that nice dimension. add your new brushes to add some interest to the edges. And next time we'll take a look at adding lines for movement and texture.